I opened the door of Richard's car, my husband, only to grab the jacket he said he had forgotten. But in the glove compartment, I didn't find a jacket. I found a tube of lubricant with residue still clinging to the cap. We hadn't been intimate for months, so why was it there? I sat in the car for a long while, my heart pounding, my head spinning. I could have confronted Richard right then. Instead, I took it inside, went to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out something no one would expect: a tube of clear superglue. I replaced all the gel inside with that cold liquid, carefully screwed the cap back on, and placed it exactly where it had been, neat as if untouched. When I finished, I drew in a deep breath. I didn't know if I had just turned into a madwoman or if I was finally waking up after 8 years of a false marriage. But I knew one thing for certain. The moment he reached for it, every secret he had tried to bury would be exposed in ways he never imagined. If you ask me why a woman with a steady life would do something so reckless as swapping lubricant with superglue, I'd probably start with the simplest thing. I once thought I was living a pretty perfect life. I was 35, born and raised in Austin, Texas. That city feeds you with sunshine, with the breeze rolling down from hill country, with the smell of hot coffee on South Congress on spring mornings full of bluebonnets. I loved Austin the way someone loves a home, knowing every corner street, every guitar riff spilling from a porch, every crowd that swelled during festival season. And I loved my work with the same kind of honesty. I owned a small chain of pastry shops, known around town for flan soft as clouds, cinnamon waffles with a crisp sugar shell, and butter-rich apple pies that older folks still called the taste of memory. I opened my first shop at 27, back when I was still renting a cramped house with a kitchen so tiny that 2 trays of pastries filled it. Richard, the man I met a year later, was then a construction engineer, supervising a project 3 blocks away. He walked in wearing dusty work clothes, ordered black coffee and a slice of banana bread. That first afternoon he said, "I've never had banana bread smell this good." I laughed, thinking it was small talk. The next day he came back. On the 3rd day, he carried a blueprint, pointed at a few lines, and said, "If you rearrange your ovens like this, the heat will circulate better, save energy, and bake faster." I stared at those lines on the paper and suddenly trusted someone I had barely learned the name of. 8 years of marriage, most of my sweetest memories tied to that bakery. Richard built me a long oak shelf, still the place where I set out fresh pastries. He measured every inch, screwed in every plank like he was building an actual bridge. "A bridge for pastries," I teased. He smiled. "A bridge for your dreams." Back then, that sentence made my throat tighten with emotion. Once, when I opened a small stall at the weekend farmers market, Richard woke before dawn, drove the old pickup loaded with a mini oven and bags of flour, humming along to the local station. I looked at his profile and thought, if happiness had a shape, it might look exactly like that morning. Simple, calm, needing no display. Chloe entered my life earlier than Richard, my college friend, who split cups of ramen with me when we were broke, who waited by the bulletin board for grades, who walked the paths around Ladybird Lake on breezy afternoons. We once swore we'd be bridesmaids for each other, name our daughters after one another's middle names, grow old still eating pizza at that shabby corner joint. Best friend, if it needs a definition, is the person who opens your fridge without asking. Chloe was exactly that. When I opened my first bakery, Chloe designed the logo for free. A sprig of rosemary woven into the letter J, delicate yet strong. She said, "You bake with your hands, with your heart. Let me build the brand with what I'm good at." I had no words deep enough to thank her. On opening day, Chloe stood behind the counter from morning till night, flour on her arms, sugar in her hair, smiling like the shop was hers. Austin is wide, but the community is small. People remember each other by the things they make. Every morning at 6:30, when I unlocked the door, Mr. Tomas, a retired music teacher, came in with his cane for a slice of lemon cake and 2 biscotti. Mrs. Ramirez bought flan for her grandkids. A nurse from St. David's rushed in for coffee before her shift. Some days, a circle of older folks lingered at the corner table, swapping stories about driving pickups without air conditioning through Texas summers, about when Congress Avenue Bridge wasn't crowded with bats, about the year ACL got rained out. I stood behind the counter, eyes stinging from cinnamon, heart softened by that simple fellowship. People didn't just come for pastries. They came to remind me I belonged to this city. Richard understood that in his quiet way. He was a Texas man, not much for words. But whenever I struggled with a big order for the Grand Hotel, he silently shifted tables, lifted mixers, tied cords, checked outlets so I could focus. I used to be an engineer, now I'm your apprentice, he'd joke. I'd tap his arm. An apprentice earns wages in both work and affection, he'd wink. Depends on the boss's standards. Chloe was louder, she turned everything into celebration. When I opened a second shop in North Loop, she threw a little party, hung golden lights, invited an indie guitarist to sing country folk tunes. Chloe always said, "You bake. I'll make people love this place." Maybe that's why I learned to lean on her, handing her keys, letting her clean when I was exhausted, asking her to attend meetings when my schedule clashed. In my small family, Chloe wasn't outside. Richard grew so used to her presence that sometimes he'd come home and casually ask, "Is Chloe here yet? She needs me to fix that loose cabinet handle." Nothing in me hesitated at such words. Back then, trust felt weightless. I loved evenings on South Congress, where the scent of leather from handmade shops mingled with tacos and freshly roasted coffee, where sunset draped porch roofs in gold. Some nights, the three of us, me, Richard, and Chloe, ate dinner on the porch. Richard's grilled skewers, my roasted corn salad, a bottle of wine Chloe picked. Nothing fancy, only laughter. Chloe told office marketing stories, failed campaigns that were funny in hindsight. Richard shared tales from the site, workers teasing each other under 100-degree sun. I bragged about the nursing home order where an old lady insisted on apple pie just like 1968. Sometimes Chloe leaned on my lap like back in college, whispering, "You're lucky, Jewel." "Richard's a good man." I nodded, squeezed her shoulder and thought, yes, I am lucky. Some say happiness is a habit. Early mornings, Richard rushed out to work, often with only a kiss on my butter and sugar-scented hair. Evenings, he sat on the porch with a can of Dr. Pepper, watching me polish pans until they gleamed. Chloe popped in, shoving food magazines into my hands, red-marking articles about this year's pastry trends, grinning like a kid bringing candy. A circle so familiar that if someone asked about my home life, I'd say, stable. I believed in that stability, believed that the man beside me could endure both droughts and floods, believed that my best friend would choose my side, even if the world collapsed. The busiest times were holidays. I took orders from churches, community centers, nursing homes. Richard took off a day or two to haul supplies. One Christmas morning, no snow but freezing cold, my hands cracked from dough. He pulled them close, spread warm buttercream over the cuts, and laughed. "Engineers rule, fix every crack." I laughed until I bent double. Chloe snapped a photo, promised to frame it for the shop. Later, that picture hung by the door, where everyone could see. Hands smeared with butter, an embrace around my waist, a smile unhidden. If there was ever a sign that read, family, it was in that frame. But there were faint smudges, things you can't name until too late. Lately, Richard was busier, his phone buzzing more. I assumed his project was at a critical stage. Chloe too, she said clients demanded a complete key visual change last minute, forcing late nights. It all made sense. Austin was booming, people were busy. Sometimes Richard texted, "Meeting in San Antonio, back tomorrow." I said, "Drive safe." Chloe said, "Dallas pitch this week, wish me luck." I replied, "Bring me a photo of that red brick building." Life looked like this. The two people I loved most, each with stories of trips, deadlines, late calls. Suspicion never crossed my mind. When your heart rests, you rarely question the wind. My third shop opened near Barton Springs, across from tall old trees. In the afternoons, sunlight filtered through leaves, laying golden squares on the floor. Older customers loved it. They said eating pastries there felt like sitting in a warm memory. One day, Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor from one house over, came for 2 flan boxes, reminiscing about her late husband who adored them. I packed them carefully, added extra caramel, said, "A little more sweetness for him." She smiled kindly. "And you? Are you well, Juliana?" I nodded. I am. Work is good, family is good. I think I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And I believed it as I said it. Richard had a habit of texting short notes if he was running late. Late, don't wait. At first I disliked it but got used to it. Job sites always had surprises. Once, he came home near. In green, midnight, the faint trace of a luxury men's cologne on him. I thought maybe he'd stopped by a client meeting at a bar. I didn't ask. That simple trust had become such a familiar doorway that I walked through without ever glancing down at the step. As for Chloe, she came and went like breathing. Lately, she borrowed my spare key more often. Need to grab my laptop to review campaign mock-ups early, she said, and I handed it over without a second thought. Once, she left a note on the kitchen table. Jewel, I accidentally took your favorite coffee mug. I'll bring it back tomorrow. On the corner of the paper, she drew a tiny heart. I laughed to myself. Long friendships carry those childish, endearing quirks. If I had to describe my marriage before the night I swapped gel for glue, I would say it was like a perfectly baked pie. The crust looked beautiful, the aroma lingered in your chest, the inside moist and smooth. You cut into it, warmth rose up, and you thought everything was right. And then, sometimes, at the core, there was a small pocket of raw dough tiny hidden under the flawless surface. I hadn't seen it. Or I had chosen not to. One Friday afternoon, Austin was hit with a sudden rain shower that cleared as quickly as it came. I sat behind the Barton Springs counter, logging a butter shipment. The door opened, wind carrying the smell of wet earth. Richard called. Late meeting, won't be home for dinner. I murmured an okay, eyes still on the numbers. Chloe texted, don't close early, I'm swinging by to hug you. Just survived a pitch that felt like a century. I set my pen down, smiled. Sometimes life felt like a tissue soaking fast, drying fast while I believed I could hold on to it all. That night Chloe really came, soaked from the rain, hair plastered down, grinning. Save me with a slice of apple pie. I cut it thicker than usual, poured her hot tea. She exhaled. You're my sedative. I asked. If you're free tomorrow, can you help me flip flan at the Grand Hotel? She winked. Easy. Then suddenly, she held my gaze longer than a beat. Jewel, are you happy? I laughed. You drink hot tea and ask cold questions? She laughed back. Kidding. You look fine. The talk drifted, but that glance was like a tiny period mark small, but leaving a trace before disappearing. I got home later than usual, turned on the yellow kitchen light, the house silent. I washed my hands, stacked some bills, reached for the towel by the sink. A faint, unfamiliar scent lingered, as if someone had just passed through that evening. I froze for a few seconds, not out of suspicion, but because I suddenly recalled a distant summer night, same kitchen, same light when Richard laid a hand on my back and said, I'm proud of you. Memory has a way of softening everything. I switched off the light, walked to the living room, leaving the towel exactly where it was. The next day, I arrived at the shop earlier than usual. Dough rose well, the oven kept steady heat, flan came out silky smooth, the young staff chattered, tables shone clean. Mrs. Peterson dropped by, I packed her extra caramel. A normal day, warm enough to make you wish it would repeat forever. And that's why, when I opened the glove compartment of Richard's car that afternoon, my world, the one I thought solid, began to fall apart. Light as powdered sugar, impossible to hold barehanded. I won't tell more here. Not because there's nothing to say, but because what happened afterward, the small signs, strange coincidences, words I ignored needs to be told in order. The way one traces strands of dough to find when the pie collapsed. At that time, I still believed I had a hard-working husband, a loyal best friend, a small warm family. And belief, sometimes, is the thinnest sugar glaze that hides the most. Since opening the third bakery, I had grown used to Richard coming home later. He always said deadlines, site inspections, clients pulling him into meetings. At first, I believed him. He was dedicated to his work, and I didn't want to become the wife who scrutinized every minute. But as the late nights grew more frequent, I began to sense something offbeat. One evening, near 10 p.m., Richard walked in, his shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, and when he hung his jacket, a scent stopped me. Too sweet, heavy, cloying, not the sandalwood and bergamot blend I knew so well, the one that once gave me safety. This was jasmine with musk, sharp like perfume sold at counters for young women. I said nothing. I stepped closer, pretended to fix his collar. He stiffened briefly, then forced a smile. Must have brushed past perfume in the bar, mixed with smoke. I nodded, not pressing. But inside, a chill spread. Another day, needing the toolbox in his truck, I opened the glove compartment. Among sight papers and pens lay a tube of lubricant, the cap smeared with clear residue. I froze, fingers rigid on the latch. We hadn't been intimate for months. I too busy with orders, he too busy with projects. The distance in bed had become an acceptable part of 8 years of marriage. But that tube didn't belong to our world. I shoved it back, closed the compartment, carried the toolbox inside. I told no one. I didn't even dare tell myself. But one question looped endlessly. If not with me, then with whom? A week later, Richard said he'd be in Dallas 2 days for contractor meetings. I saw him off, still smiling, tucking a box of butter cookies into his bag for the road. But the next day, cleaning the living room desk, I found a hotel receipt stuck under his papers. Printed clear, San Antonio, double room, charged to Richard's card. I sat down hard, hands trembling, nearly spilling my steaming tea. Dallas and San Antonio are hundreds of miles apart. So, he had lied. That evening when he called, his tone was steady. Meeting ran long. I'll be back later than planned. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, voice slow. Dallas must be crowded this time of year, huh? A pause, then quick. Yeah, same as always. Sleep early. I murmured okay, hung up, my hand crushing the receipt into wrinkles. I started noticing more. Richard set his phone face down, locking the screen when I walked in. Sometimes he texted without smiling, tension on his face, hiding it fast. Once, past midnight, he stepped outside for a work call, but came back with eyes unfocused, avoiding mine. One noon, Chloe came by the bakery, arms full of sunflowers, beaming. Bought these for you, brightened the counter. I thanked her, set them in a vase. Looking at her, I thought, at least I still have my best friend. If anyone, Chloe was always there. But in that moment, a familiar scent wafted jasmine with musk, identical to Richard's shirt that night. I shivered, then brushed it off. Impossible, no reason. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, all lights off except the sink lamp. Disjointed pieces spun in my head, the strange perfume, the lubricant, the San Antonio receipt, the evasive eyes. Each detail alone could be explained, but strung together, the picture sharpened too clearly. I didn't want to believe. I gripped the oak counter Richard once built, remembering the day he told me at the first shop, a bridge for your dreams. That memory had glazed over cracks, but now, the glaze was fractured. My instincts screamed, something was wrong. Wrong enough that I no longer dared meet the eyes of the man who once vowed to walk beside me for life. That evening, I cleared the dining table later than usual. Richard had come back from his Dallas site. So tired he flung his laptop onto the couch before heading to the shower. I wiped crumbs, planning to place Chloe's sunflowers in a vase. Passing the couch, blue light flickered from the laptop. Richard was always private with tech. He often said he hated email. But this time, the computer hadn't locked. Screen bright with an open inbox. I meant only to close it, not pry. But then the first line of an email stood out. You drove me crazy last night. See. I froze, breath stuck. The signature at the bottom bore only one letter. C. And in that instant, one name slammed into me. Chloe. The friend who ate ramen with me in dorm nights. Who held my hand crying when my father died. Who cradled my son first after I gave birth. The one I always called sister, without shared blood. I shook as if doused with ice water. My hands dug into the counter edge, nails carving deep. Richard stepped out of the bathroom, hair wet, towel over his shoulders. Seeing me frozen by the couch, he frowned. What's wrong? I swallowed hard, masking the storm inside. Nothing, I was just tidying. Your laptop lit up. He hurried over, shut the screen, forced a laugh. Spam, probably. I'm sick of ads. Then he brushed a quick kiss on my forehead, heading to the bedroom like nothing happened. I sank into a chair, hands pressed to my knees to stop them shaking. In my mind, the images strung together, the strange perfume, the hotel receipt, the lubricant, and now the email signed C. The last piece struck like a blade, illuminating the betrayal I had tried to blur. That night, I didn't sleep. Richard snored steadily beside me, while I stared wide-eyed at the ceiling. The pain surged, yet strangely, no tears came. Instead, a sharp silence wrapped around me. Inside, I was both a storm and a clarity I had never known. The next morning, Chloe called, inviting me to lunch. Her voice was the same familiar brightness. "Hey, I know this new Italian place. Their tiramisu is amazing. Come with me?" Hearing her, each word pricked like a thorn. I drew a deep breath, forcing my tone calm. "Sure, I'll arrange it." Hanging up, I squeezed the phone so hard my palm reddened. Why her? Why the one I trusted most? That noon, I sat across from Chloe under golden lights in the Italian restaurant. She wore a floral dress, laughing brightly, telling stories about difficult clients at her company, then casually scooped a piece of tiramisu onto my plate. "Try it, it's delicious." I managed a strained smile, the scent of her hair drifting over jasmine with musk, the same scent I had smelled on Richard's shirt. My chest tightened. I listened, saying little. In my head, questions screamed. Did she feel guilt when she looked into my eyes, or had she grown too accustomed to hiding? That afternoon, I returned to the bakery. Butter, vanilla, caramelized sugar filled the kitchen scents that once gave me safety. Today, they only suffocated. I wiped my hands on my apron, pulled out my phone, looked again at the hotel receipt I had photographed. Then I opened my laptop, printed a copy. I needed evidence. That night, when Richard slept deeply, I sat alone in the living room. The desk lamp cast my reflection in the glass. I no longer saw a trembling woman cowering before the storm. I saw a coldness forming. I wrote a few lines in the notebook I usually used for recipes. Don't cry, don't rage, only truth. And truth will be the weapon. I closed the notebook, slid it into the drawer. In my mind, a plan was taking shape, not reckless reactions, but slow, deliberate steps. If Richard and Chloe had chosen betrayal, then my silence would become their greatest fear. And I swore I would expose the truth when they least expected it. I had never imagined hiring a detective to follow my husband and my best friend. But after that email with the fatal C, I knew I could no longer look away. My heart bled, but reason had to be firm. If Richard was truly unfaithful, if Chloe was the one intruding, then the truth had to be uncovered to the very end. One afternoon, I met Mark, the detective a business club acquaintance had recommended. A small cafe tucked along Congress Avenue, Texas, sunlight streaming through glass, warm, yet suffocating. Mark was in his 40s, stocky, sharp-eyed, but spoke with slow calm. He set a leather notebook on the table, pen poised from the start. "Mrs. Roberts, I need you to be direct. What do you want?" I hesitated, then drew a breath. "I want to know if my husband is cheating, and with whom." Mark's gaze didn't flicker, as if he'd heard this hundreds of times. He simply nodded. "I'll need details. His schedule, routines, close acquaintances." I listed Richard, the projects he often used as excuses. But when I reached Chloe, my voice shook. I stared at the cappuccino in front of me, its foam gone flat. "Chloe is my best friend. I'm not sure. But I'm afraid." Mark jotted notes quickly, then shut the notebook. "I'll start tonight. All information, photos, videos I'll send directly. But be prepared. Sometimes truth is crueler than suspicion." Only 2 days later, the first message came. My phone buzzed lightly as I stood in the bakery kitchen, rolling dough for the morning croissants. I wiped flour from my hands, opened it. A photo appeared, Richard and Chloe. They were entering a 4-star hotel in downtown Austin. Richard wore a gray shirt, jacket draped over his arm. Chloe in a fitted black dress, hair loose. Their hands intertwined like open lovers, no hesitation. My stomach knotted, vision blurred. The dough before me wavered like water. I braced on the counter to keep from collapsing. Another message from Mark. They went to a third-floor room. I'll send video when I get clearer footage. I didn't reply, only sank onto a wooden chair, mind spinning. Vague fears had become real blades, stabbing straight into my chest. The man I had trusted for 8 years, the friend of 20 hand in hand into a hotel like illicit lovers. That afternoon, when the bakery quieted, another video arrived. I trembled opening it. In the clip, Richard and Chloe stood in the hotel lobby, near the desk. Richard leaned close, whispering. Chloe giggled, then they kissed under the soft yellow lights. Not hurried, not forced. A kiss, tender, intimate, natural, as if they'd done it 100 times. I bit my lip until it bled, but forced myself to watch it through. My heart shattered, but in the ashes, something else flared. Resolve. I whispered in the kitchen's dark. All right, Richard. All right, Chloe. You think you can fool me forever? That night, Richard came home late. He opened the door, kicked off his shoes, tossed his bag, as usual. I stared at him long but asked nothing. He feigned weariness. I played the gentle wife. He had no idea everything he did behind my back was now recorded. The next day, Mark called directly. Mrs. Juliana, I have more. They're not just meeting for romance. I overheard in the lobby. They're discussing a transfer contract. Do you know what that could mean? I froze. Transfer contract instantly. I thought of my bakery chain. Are you sure? I'll keep monitoring to confirm. But you should prepare, this may not be only betrayal of the heart. I sat in the small office behind the bakery. On the wall hung a photo from the first grand opening. Me, Richard, and Chloe too, cutting the ribbon. Back then, I believed in a perfect family, a tight circle of friends. Now the photo felt like a cruel joke. I shut my eyes, waves crashing inside. If it were only an affair, maybe I would walk away, heal on my own. But if they aimed to take my career, then this was war. And no matter the pain, I could not let them steal what I had built with blood and sweat. I picked up my phone, texted Mark. Keep tracking. I need every piece of evidence, not a detail missed. My fingers shook pressing send, but in my eyes, cold determination burned. I wouldn't only expose their bed betrayal. I would stop their scheme to seize the dream I had labored for. And this time, I would hold the blade. One evening, after the bakery closed, I sat alone in the small office behind the kitchen. My phone buzzed, Mark's message. You should hear this now. Very important. My chest tightened. I plugged in earphones, played the file. Richard's voice came first, deep, familiar, stabbing me. As soon as Juliana signs the authorization, the bakery chain will be ours. A pause, then Chloe's voice. Sweet but calculated. She trusts me completely. I'll persuade her. Don't worry. I sat frozen. Earphones tight, each word cutting into flesh. Not only betrayal of marriage, they wanted the one thing that was my blood, my sweat, my soul. The bakeries I had built from nothing. I pulled off the earphones, folded over the desk, fists clenched white. Tears threatened but would not fall. Pain turned into an icy surge down my spine. A knock at the office door. I wiped my face quickly, steadied my tone. Come in. Young employee Ben peeked in. Ms. Juliana, I stored the dough batch in the back. Should I lock the side door? Yes, lock it. Thank you. Ben smiled, left. I heard the door click shut, silence return. Only the ticking wall clock remained. I replayed the recording again, this time not trembling but focused, like a lawyer reviewing evidence before trial. I knew. If I lashed out, confronted them now, they'd deny. Even move faster to cut me out. To protect my career and my dignity, I couldn't act rashly. I needed to be smart. 2 days later, Chloe asked to meet at our usual cafe near the bakery. She was already seated with a radiant smile, waving, Jewel, over here. I walked over, trying to keep my face free of suspicion. Chloe handed me the menu, her eyes sparkling. Listen, I just thought of a way to help you expand the chain. Some of the legal procedures are really tricky. But if you trust me, I'll handle the paperwork and everything will move quickly. I looked at her, that familiar perfume drifting again. My voice came out light, as if I only cared about business. What do you think I should do? Chloe lowered her voice, leaning closer. Sign a temporary authorization. Let Richard and me deal with the lawyers. You'll be free to focus on the products. No need to worry about documents. Trust me, Jewel. You know I see you as my sister. I smiled, sipping coffee to hide the trembling inside. Sister, of course. In my mind, every word from the recording replayed. I bit my lip hard to keep from letting out a bitter laugh. That night when I got home, Richard handed me a folder. He acted casual. Honey, these are a few papers about opening another branch. Just sign here, I'll handle the rest. I flipped through the pages. All legal jargon, tangled numbers, deliberately vague. I looked up at him, masking fury with a gentle smile. You know I'm not good with documents. I'll take these to Chloe tomorrow to review. Richard froze for a beat, then nodded, eyes flashing with satisfaction. He thought I had taken the bait. That night, when he slept, I quietly reopened the folder, photographed each page, and sent them to Mark. Less than an hour later, Mark called back, his voice firm, just as I suspected. This is a full authorization of management and ownership of the bakery chain. If you sign, you lose everything. I closed my eyes, drew a long breath. My body stretched tight like a string, but inside, a fire burned. I couldn't let them win. Mark, keep everything quiet. And I want to prepare a counterstrike. On the other end, Mark paused, then replied, I understand. Keep pretending you trust them. When the time comes, we'll show them they dug their own grave. I sat in the dark, heart aching, but eyes resolute. I knew this battle was only beginning, and for the first time in weeks, I no longer trembled. I had a plan. I started with the smallest things. Not loud. Not rushed. Just a woman sitting alone in her familiar kitchen, the heart of the house quietly sorting each decayed memory into clear evidence. On the table were a printer, a laptop, and a wooden box filled with backups, screenshots of emails with the letter C, the printed hotel bill from San Antonio, the photo of the lubricant I found in his car, the detective's video clip Richard and Chloe hand in hand entering the hotel, kissing in the lobby as if they owed no one. I placed each piece into its own envelope, numbered and dated. With my own hands, I stitched them together as if sewing the final seam on the funeral gown of a marriage. That night, while Richard showered, I went into the garage. His car engine was still warm. I opened the glove compartment, the yellow light glinting on the familiar clear plastic tube. I picked it up, steady, no longer trembling. After a moment, I placed it back exactly where it had been, gentle. Without a trace, I knew he wouldn't check. They had never thought me perceptive. And truth was, I hadn't been. I had been the one who trusted, who laid out dinner when he came home late, who cooked extra for my best friend, dropping by. But now, everything had changed. I walked back inside, entered the bedroom. When Richard settled in the living room with his usual glass of whiskey, I locked the door, switched on the dim bedside lamp, and sat on the bed as if nothing had happened. Beneath the curtain near the nightstand, I fixed the small recording device Mark had given me. He had said, within 3 feet, the sound will be crystal clear. Just switch it on before you leave. I tested it, played back a snippet. Clear as day. I smiled, set it in place, then slid the family photo back over it. In the frame, Richard's hand rested on my shoulder, Chloe beaming beside Daniel, my son from my first marriage. I stared at that photo, silent. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones you once invited into your home, poured the first glass of wine for, and called sister. The next morning, I went to the bakery early as usual. Before anyone arrived, I slipped into the back gas kitchen. The system checked fine. I wiped down the counters, adjusted a few things. Then I set up a simple mechanism, what I called conditional smoke. It wouldn't burn, wouldn't hurt anyone. But if triggered at the right time, it would release thick smoke enough to make neighbors panic and call for help. I needed a signal. A situation that would send people rushing into my house without knocking, without asking, and witness the truth. No fireworks, just smoke. And what happened inside would speak for itself. That night, when Richard came home late, I still greeted him with dinner as always. I set a plate of baked salmon in front of him, poured wine. "You're home early today?" he asked, avoiding my eyes. "Yes, the shop wasn't busy. I wanted to rest a little." We ate under soft light, like an ordinary couple. But behind that glow were devices ready, recordings running, sealed evidence. I asked lightly, as if with casual curiosity, "How's Chloe these days? Haven't seen her at the shop." Richard hesitated a beat. "Oh, she's busy at the pharmaceutical company. Some project." I smiled, nodded. "I miss her stopping by." Dinner ended in silence. I cleared dishes, washed as usual, and when Richard went upstairs, I stayed at the table, drying wine glasses with a clean cloth. The yellow light shone on my hands hardened from thousands of pastries. I had used them to build a business, to care for a family, to hold everything together. And now, those same hands prepared to end a play I never wanted to act in. I looked at the ceiling calm, waiting. Something was coming. I didn't know which motel they would choose next night, but I had a sense. Soon, this very house would be the meeting place. And I would be closer than they thought. I picked up my phone, texted Mark one line, "Device ready. I'll signal when needed." "No." Reply right away. But I knew he understood. The game had begun. And I was no longer just a spectator. I chose a weekday morning. Not a weekend when neighbors watched closely. Not a holiday when chaos spread. A plain morning, sun steady, breeze soft through the magnolia row outside the bakery. I rose earlier than usual. Light gray coat, hair pinned up, purse on my shoulder. I looked like a busy woman headed for an important contract signing. Breakfast was quick. Boiled egg, 2 slices of toast, a glass of orange juice. Richard came down groggy, but sharpened when he heard me say, "I have to go to Houston today, meeting with a new investor. Might be late, maybe stay overnight if traffic's bad." He froze half a second, then masked it by sipping juice. "Big partner?" "Yes. If it goes well, the Houston branch could be in the plan this month." I wasn't lying. I just didn't need a real branch. Richard nodded slowly. I saw it something in his eyes. Relief and eagerness. "Be careful. Want me to drive you to the station?" I shook my head. "No need. I booked a ride." I left before 8 a.m. But instead of the highway, I turned down the back road, stopping at Mrs. Peterson's house just a white fence yard away, her rose garden blooming as always. She opened the door as soon as I rang. Over 60, she had been the first neighbor to welcome us here after our wedding. "Juliana, are you sure?" she asked, leading me to her small living room, its window facing my kitchen. "I'm sure. But if I'm wrong, at least I'll know I was careful." I sat, opened my phone, earphones linked to the recorder I'd hidden in the bedroom. The sound buzzed faintly, then cleared. I heard the front door open, familiar footsteps. Richard's voice on the phone, loud as always when he thought he was alone. I pulled a small notebook from my bag, jotting timestamps. Mrs. Peterson poured tea, set cookies nearby, but neither of us touched them. Each minute dragged like waiting outside an operating room. Then the sound shifted. A knock. Richard unlocking. A woman's soft laugh. I knew that voice instantly. Chloe. Finally free. I thought I'd have to wait until the weekend. Richard's voice. Low enough I turned volume up. "Juliana's gone all day. Maybe overnight." "At last? We have this house to ourselves." The words sliced cold. I straightened, hands tight not from anger but from a strange calm. No more shock, no more pain, only a silence sharp enough to cut. As if my mind had prepared for this moment all along. I looked at Mrs. Peterson. She didn't ask, only placed her hand over mine, a small gesture enough to keep me from tears. In the earphones, footsteps, stifled laughter, the pour of wine, then the bedroom door closing. I removed the earphones. I didn't need more. I had proof. I knew where the man I trusted most stood. I knew which side of the bed my so-called sister had chosen. Mrs. Peterson asked softly, "What will you do now?" I looked out the window. Through the curtain, the bedroom window stayed shut. Sunlight angled across the porch, the sky clear. A perfect morning for truth to surface. I'll let them think they've won. I checked my watch. It was time to move to the next stage. And this time, every eye would see me not as a blind wife, but as the one who no longer needed to shout to be believed. They would expose themselves inside the very house they thought was theirs alone. I adjusted my coat strap, closed the notebook, inhaled deep. Inside me, no hatred, only resolve. And a peace approaching. Because I knew once that door opened, there would be no turning back for them. I sat in Mrs. Peterson's living room, eyes fixed on the house I knew so well, once my home, now a stage where I was both playwright and audience, waiting for the climax. Noon sun struck the street, slowing the whole neighborhood's breath. In my earphones, faint laughter, whispers. Then, suddenly, ragged breathing, heavy moans. Not of pain, but of something any betrayed wife recognizes without explanation. I didn't close my eyes, didn't turn away. I simply set my coffee cup on the table and pressed my finger to the phone. A faint click sounded from the app. That was the moment I triggered the mechanism I had prepared all week. No fire, no danger. Just a thick wave of smoke funneled through the gas system, like an unattended grease fire, enough to force the whole neighborhood to notice. In my earphones, Richard's voice suddenly turned frantic. "What's that? Do you smell something?" Then Chloe's voice, sharp and panicked. "Smoke! There's smoke! Oh my God! We're cut off." A second later, her high-pitched scream pierced through. "Oh God! We're caught! Richard! I can't move!" I closed my eyes, not to block the sound, but to let the feeling pass through my chest. Not satisfaction, not anger, but the final silence of someone who had endured too long and finally watched the curtain fall. Outside the window, I saw smoke seep from the kitchen. Not too heavy, but dark enough, real enough. A flock of sparrows shot up from the opposite roof. Mrs. Peterson looked at me without a word. I nodded slightly. She rose, cracked the front door open. Not 2 minutes later, shouts rang down the street. "Smoke! Juliana's house is smoking! Someone called Chinchum remote." Footsteps thundered. An alarm wailed from someone's phone. I sat still, calm as if watching a play, coffee cup warm in my hand. My hands didn't shake. My eyes held no tears. Only the slow beat of my heart, counting down to the moment of exposure. In less than 5 minutes, the sirens wailed from the end of the street. A blazing red fire truck turned onto the narrow road, tires grinding against hot asphalt like a slash through peace. And then, the first one to step down, Daniel. My son. His firefighter uniform snug, dark turnout coat, helmet tilted, eyes steady, determined. The sight wrenched my chest, not from fear, but pain. He was about to see what no one should ever see, especially not from his father and his wife. "This way." A neighbor pointed toward my house. "Smoke's coming from the kitchen," Daniel signaled forward. 3 teammates behind carried extinguishers, hoses, crowbars. They slammed into the locked front door, bolted from inside, and within moments, it burst open. Smoke poured out in heavy plumes. In my earphones, Richard shouted, "What the hell is happening? Chloe, don't move!" Chloe sobbed, strangled. "I can't get out. This isn't normal." One firefighter yelled, "Check the bedroom, someone could be trapped." Daniel charged first. I heard his boots pound across wood, the thud of gear against the familiar tile. Then, silence. Long, heavy. And then, "Dad?" Daniel's voice. Each word cracked open. I couldn't see his face, but I knew from the sound alone it was like blood spilling straight from his chest. Then another firefighter whispered, clear enough, "Oh God, they're stuck together." A short, stunned laugh burst out quickly, silenced by a sharp command. "Quiet." Chloe wailed, "Please, cover me." Richard muttered, "No, this can't be." I sat by the window, each sound a hammer blow against the walls they had built themselves. Outside, neighbors gathered. Murmurs, stunned, stares, phones lifting high, cameras, pictures, video evidence I didn't even need to collect. They did it for me. And I sat there, coffee in hand, eyes cold, watching the final curtain drop. No need to speak, no need to step forward. Truth had its own voice. And today, it rang loud enough that no one could pretend not to hear. Under the noon sun, sirens faded, but the air around my house thickened. More people crowded in, scattered across lawns, sidewalks, Mrs. Peterson's yard. Some still carried grocery bags dusted with flour, others wore baseball caps with mail satchels slung. Every gaze fixed on one place, the shattered front door of my house. Whispers rolled like a wave. Is that really Juliana's husband? And that woman, isn't she the bakery friend? My God. Stuck together? Like in a movie. Inside, Daniel's footsteps quickened. He said nothing more. All words swallowed in his chest. But the voice of a younger firefighter cut through, half choking on a laugh, half disbelief. Oh man, this is… Silence, the captain barked. Blade sharp. This is a live scene. No commentary. I knew that boy hadn't meant harm. But for Daniel, even those stifled chuckles could scar forever. The bedroom door flew open, and dozens of eyes locked on a scene no one believed real. Richard, the man who once built this house with me, who once waited with flowers when I came home from my first South Lamar bakery, now sprawled sideways on the bed, face flushed, sweat pouring. He howled, weakly flailing, clutching a sheet to cover bare skin. Chloe lay tangled beside him, hair wild, eyes swollen, voice breaking. Please, don't look, don't record. But it was too late. An older woman raised her phone to film. A student in glasses went live. I can't believe this. This is Springdale, Austin. Juliana's husband, Richard, and her best friend. They're stuck together in bed. My God. Within seconds, those words echoed through earbuds, screens, messages. That image, a smoky room, two frantic, naked bodies begging, sobbing, was no longer private. It etched itself into the memory of the neighborhood, and soon, the internet. I stayed by Mrs. Peterson's window, coffee long gone cold. She placed a hand on my shoulder, eyes soft with compassion. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumph. Only a deep quiet, as if every cell in me bore witness to the final collapse of a story I had clung to too long. A neighbor whispered to Mrs. Peterson, not knowing I heard. Juliana knew all along, didn't she? She's too calm, Mrs. Peterson answered softly. She doesn't need to scream. Truth's loud enough. At that moment, Daniel emerged. His face white as paper, uniform smeared with smoke and sweat. In his hands, a sheet hastily thrown over Richard and Chloe. He looked at no one, only at me, his eyes locking onto mine, wordless. I nodded slowly. Not because I wanted my son to learn this way, but because unless he saw with his own eyes, he'd never believe me. Never believe his father and his wife could betray like this. And that the woman he once thought fragile was steady enough to orchestrate it all without a single shout. From the crowd came a voice. Police are here. Someone called. Is this abuse? Cheating? God! A squad car pulled in, siren soft, steady. A paramedic followed, then the local fire chief. I rose, not hurried, not shaking. Mrs. Peterson opened the gate. I walked past the murmuring crowd, step by step, every eye on me. Some avoided my gaze, some nodded, acknowledging the truth in my stance. A young woman, maybe a freelance reporter, raised a mic. I said only one line. I am Richard's wife. And she, Chloe, was the woman I once called my sister. I needed no more. The rest, the neighborhood, the internet, would carry forward. As for me, I had one task left. To walk out of that wreckage standing tall. Because a betrayed woman is not a victim if she still knows who she is, and if she still stands. And I still stood. I arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital in less than 20 minutes, right after the ambulance brought Richard and Chloe. Still in my dark business clothes, I stepped through the ER doors like a wife in shock. Just told her husband and friend had collapsed. In my hand was a small paper bag inside, 2 burn ointment tubes, which I had replaced before leaving home. Outside the emergency room, chaos. A young nurse rushed out, face flushed, shouting, "Quick, bring the cooling spray. This case is unusual." I sat in the waiting chairs, hands clasped. A few people passing by looked at me oddly. Maybe they recognized me from the clip spreading like wildfire online. I overheard whispers. That's his wife. The bakery owner, Juliana. Must be in shock. I bowed my head slightly, composed. Inside me, everything sharp. lucid as though I were watching the final act of a play for which I had written every line. About 10 minutes later, a middle-aged female doctor walked out of the treatment room, hurrying toward the reception desk. I stood up, stepped closer, my voice low and trembling slightly. "I'm the wife of patient Richard Hayes. I heard he had an accident." The doctor paused, her expression a little uneasy, then nodded. "Yes. We're dealing with a very unusual case. Some areas of skin are fused with an unknown chemical substance. His condition isn't life-threatening. But the pain is severe." I brought the topical cream you prescribed Richard before I held out the small bag, speaking earnestly. "If you think it helps, you can use it for him." The doctor looked at me for a moment, then nodded, thanked me, and took the bag. I bowed my head slightly and returned to my seat. A few minutes later, from inside, shrieks rang out. "It burns! My skin is on fire! Oh God!" Chloe's voice. Then Richard's, hoarse. "Stop! Please! Something's wrong!" Hurried footsteps, the crash of equipment, nurses shouting, "Stop applying! Flush with water now! Who brought that ointment?" A young male doctor bolted out, panicked. "Run a test on the contents. Did someone bring the wrong medication?" I stayed seated, calm, silent. No one noticed my fingers tapping softly against the table, counting precisely. 40 minutes since I left home, 20 minutes for the ambulance to arrive, 15 minutes for the doctors to rotate shifts. And now, the time for me to step in and finish it. A nurse came out and called, gently, "Mrs. Hayes, your husband is very agitated. He wants to see you." I rose. My steps neither rushed nor slow. Down the stark white hallway, the fluorescent lights cast a cold sheen on the polished tiles. The hospital room door swung open, and I walked inside. Chloe lay on the right bed, pale, eyes still swollen. Angry red patches on her arm and side were being rinsed with saline. Richard slumped on the opposite bed, a hospital blanket draped over his shoulders, face twisted, gasping for breath. When he saw me, he lurched upright. "Juliana, I can explain." I raised my hand slightly, cutting him off. "You don't need to explain. I didn't come here for excuses." I opened my handbag, pulled out a neat black leather folder. Stepping forward, I placed it gently on the table between their beds. "This is the divorce petition, along with complete copies of the evidence of your affair with Chloe. Videos, photos, recordings, everything's prepared. All you need to do is sign." Richard froze. Chloe whispered weakly, her voice thin. "Juliana, it's not what you think. You don't understand." I turned to her, my gaze calm, almost icy. "You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how someone I trusted with a house key, invited to dinner every week, could end up in my bed, with my husband. Plotting to steal the very business I built." I faced Richard again. "I don't need to expose you. It's already exposed. Online, in the papers. In the eyes of our neighbors, in Daniel's eyes. At our son's name." Richard's face blanched. His hands trembled as he opened the folder. His eyes scanned the glossy photos, the detailed logs of dates, locations, video transcripts, notes in the lawyer's handwriting. Premarital assets excluded from division. I turned toward the door. "I'll leave the papers here. Sign them, send them to the lawyer's office. If needed, they'll reach out. Oh, and that ointment? Maybe next time read the label before you use it." Chloe stared at me, lips pressed tight, her face flushed, whether from pain, fury, or shame. I couldn't tell. I didn't wait for a response. The door shut behind me. In the hallway, the late afternoon sun spilled across the floor, golden and quiet. I stepped out of the hospital. Inside me, no turbulence. Not because I'd given enough payback, but because I'd finally reclaimed what they thought I never had, the right to end it. And I had ended it on terms no one could deny. I didn't need another word. Silence this time was the loudest echo. In less than 2 days after the video spread, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Not from reporters, not from nosy acquaintances, but from the very people who once stayed silent at neighborhood dinners, who once only nodded faintly when I passed with a basket of bread. Now they called, texted, walked into the bakery not to pry, but to stand with me. I've never seen anyone hold themselves with such composure, Juliana. Mrs. Sarah, who lived 4 houses down, said as she ordered 30 flans for her granddaughter's birthday. "My daughter took your baking class years ago," she told me. "Mom, Ms. Juliana is truly strong," another customer said, her voice trembling but her eyes bright. Crowds flowed into the bakery as if my own breaking had become the reason others wanted to hold tighter. I felt no gloating, only lightness, as if all the weary days had been baked into loaves spiced with cinnamon and vanilla, then passed around and received with genuine warmth. Meanwhile, Richard was suspended the very day of the accident. The engineering firm where he'd led projects formally cut ties with the city, citing image reasons. The Austin Weekly ran the headline, "Senior Engineer Exposed in Wife's Home Scandal." The cover photo was a grainy frame, but clear enough to show Richard being carried from my smoke-filled house, bare feet peeking, beneath a flimsy blanket. He called me exactly 3 times after signing the divorce papers, each unanswered. His final message, "I've lost everything." I didn't reply. Because the truth was, he had let it all go long before. Chloe fared no better. Her boutique, once branded with bold letters, "Curated by Chloe" on South Congress, closed within a week. Regular clients demanded refunds. Others returned purchases, saying they couldn't wear clothes from a betrayer. Her conservative family refused to stand by her. I heard her mother even said at dinner, "The daughter I raised for 18 years can't be the woman in that video." Chloe vanished from social media. No posts, no brunch snapshots, no sleek suits. The friends she once clinked glasses with every weekend went silent, as if they'd never known her. And me? I reset my home. I took down the family photo from the hallway and replaced it with a new frame. Me, Daniel, and a wooden plaque carved with "Juliana's Bakery, Est, Hangin Lair Mur High." I didn't make a scene. I simply repainted the kitchen door, swapped out a few worn chairs, hung a wind chime by the window. Small things, but enough to feel I no longer lived among lies. One afternoon, Daniel came home, set a wooden box on the counter. "Keep this, Mom. It's the full copy of the videos, recordings, and photos from the detective. If someday you ever need them, even just to remind yourself what you survived." I nodded, my eyes hot but dry. "Thank you, son." Daniel said nothing more. He stood for a while, then rolled up his sleeves and joined me in the back kitchen, sliding trays of fresh bread from the oven. Some customers came in for the first time, pausing as if stepping into a place they'd heard about in whispers. They looked around, then asked softly, "Is this Ms. Juliana's Bakery? The one who—" I didn't let them finish. I smiled. "I'm Juliana. And this is my bakery." They nodded, eyes respectful. Some ordered more than they planned. Some returned days later with friends. Some left only a small note, "You don't just bake well, you make truth believable." And me, after all of it, I could finally live real, no more swallowing pain, no more pretending. I could be myself. Among people who believed strength wasn't about never being broken but about rising again with a heart that still bore the cracks. That morning, Austin's sky was crystal clear. Sunlight poured through the bakery's front glass, spilling over trays of golden flan and steaming butter loaves. I stood behind the counter, oven mitts still on, smiling at the line curling out the door. A student clutching worn textbooks, reading while she waited. An old cowboy hat perched on a man sipping black coffee from home. A mother wrangling 2 children, one clutching a pastry, the other whining for another almond cookie. All of them, every glance, every smile, every patient step in line answered the question I had asked myself in my darkest nights. After everything, can I begin again? The answer was never in court papers, nor in street whispers, nor in the viral clip. It was right here in the scent of fresh cookies, the jingle of the door chime, and the quiet nods as I slid trays across the counter. Daniel walked in from the back, shirt damp with sweat but his smile brighter than ever. "Mom, the second oven's done. Today's flan batch looks perfect." I nodded without looking. "Get another tray out. Customers are waiting." Where I stood used to be an old storage room beside the first shop, now remodeled into the main baking area. I expanded the space by tearing down a wall and installing a large glass window so customers could watch the baking process. Some children often pressed their faces against the glass, wide-eyed, watching me stir caramel as if it were magic. Someone once told me, People can only rise when they have a place to return to. I think sometimes you don't. I need to return anywhere. You just need to build your own ground to stand on. And I did. Right here. I turned to the oven, opened it, and pulled out a tray of fresh pastries. Heat rushed out, warm and sweet. In that moment, I remembered the sting in my chest the day I stood in a smoke-filled house, not from fire, but from a life collapsing. They once wanted to burn everything of mine down. I looked into the steady flame inside the oven, quietly. But I had turned that flame into a baker's fire, the place where everything began again. Outside, the door chime rang again. A regular customer, the bookstore owner nearby, waved. "Same as always, Juliana? One flan, one iced coffee, one word of encouragement?" I smiled. "Today add an almond tart. The weather's too nice." He nodded warmly, then pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of the crowded counter. I heard him whisper to a friend beside him, "That's her. The woman who was betrayed so publicly. Now look at her. Standing like nothing could touch her anymore." I didn't catch the whole sentence, but it was enough to warm me, not because of recognition, but because I no longer had to hide anything. I wiped my hands, removed my gloves, and stepped out from behind the counter. The morning breeze drifted cool under the awning. The trees along the street cast shadows across the pavement. I walked slowly along the sidewalk in front of the bakery, the same sidewalk where I once kept my head down whenever someone mentioned my name, now the place where I walked upright, calm, proud, not because I had won, but because I no longer needed to fight to hold on to something already rotting from within. All it takes is a strong enough flame, a steady enough heart, and an oven that knows how to keep warm what deserves to last. I, Juliana, 35 years old, owner of a small bakery in Austin, Texas, had started again from ashes like that, and from where I stood now, the world was still as sweet as a fresh batch out of the oven. If you've ever been in the same place as me, quietly sacrificing, only to realize one day you were just a shadow in your own family, you'll understand what I've been through. I don't tell this story to accuse or to slander anyone. I tell it because maybe somewhere out there, someone is silently enduring the way I once did. And if you are in that place, I want you to know, you are not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Have you ever stayed silent so long that your silence ended up hurting you more than any words could? I want to hear your story. And who knows, maybe your words will help someone else out there find the courage for their own. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If this story touched something in your heart, don't forget to like, share with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the stories to come. Because in this world we may all be different, but pain, sacrifice, and the journey of finding ourselves again, those are paths everyone has walked. See you in the next stories where truth is told in a gentle voice, yet strong enough to reach the deepest parts of the heart.